not trying to get in football move this soon. We are going to try to get in football move this soon because we had a conversation with the AFC North. Are they the division with the most questions? And the Cleveland Browns are in that division. For lack of a better term, Chris Canty, this organization, the NFL, granted the Browns franchise to be back in that city since 1999. They started 40 different starting quarterbacks. 0, not foe, F-O, 40 different starting quarterbacks. And more than likely, as we read the tea leaves and everything, that Joe Flacco may once again be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. CC made sense of the nonsense at quarterback in Cleveland.
I can't make sense of Joe Flacco being the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, at least not the majority of the games. If Joe Flacco ends up being the starter for the first quarters of the season, then so be it. I can understand wanting to make sure that you don't throw any of the young guys in there before they're ready. And so looking at the first quarter of the season like extended preseason, one of the approaches that Bill Belichick used to take, I get that. And letting Joe Flacco be the one to take all of the slings and arrows, all of the criticism in terms of what the bar is for that team and them not necessarily being as good as what the fans want them to be. I can understand that, at least early on. Right. But if Shedeur Sanders and or Dylan Gabriel don't end up starting the majority of the games for the Cleveland Browns this year, it is franchise malpractice. And here's the reason why. Those two realistically are the only ones that at least have an opportunity to be the long-term solution at the quarterback position for Cleveland. We know it's not Joe Flacco. Age disqualifies him from the conversation. We know it's likely not Kenny Pickett. We've seen him across multiple stops in the NFL not be good enough. So really, it's on Dylan Gabriel, it's on Shedeur Sanders. If one of those guys can show that they are the long-term solution for the Cleveland Browns, then all of a sudden, this franchise becomes a rocket ship. Because what they did early on in the NFL draft, trading back to the number 5 slot, allowing the Jacksonville Jaguars to move up to number 2, netted them a first-round pick in 2026 in a quarterback-rich draft. Right. And so if you need a quarterback, great. You've got the ammunition to get it in 2026 in the first round, which is where the majority of teams find their franchise quarterbacks. But if you catch lightning in a bottle, and it ends up being Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel showing enough this year that you feel like it's worth passing on next year's crop of quarterbacks, then all of a sudden the Cleveland Browns have maximum flexibility in terms of what they can do. Think about what they would be able to do, trading those picks, trading down in the first round, and allowing other teams to move up in order to acquire a quarterback. Or you can end up taking position players and end up being in a situation where you get 2 premium players in one draft that you got in the first round. All of a sudden now, the Cleveland Browns, the fortunes of the franchise feels like it takes a massive shift, and they're getting away from the Deshaun Watson era. So, to me, Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel can't be the guys starting the majority of the games this upcoming season.
This is what the Cleveland Browns get for having Baker Mayfield be the whipping boy for their sins. Because that's what this comes down to. They decided that with everything falling apart, that guy, even though he didn't play well, he went out there and played injured. He went out there and was getting beat down in the inside of the organization, didn't point fingers, nothing like that. And they decided that Deshaun Watson, with all his baggage, even though he's an elite quarterback, with all that baggage, giving him that kind of guaranteed money, saying Baker Mayfield was the reason that we weren't winning. And Baker Mayfield was like, I wasn't the only reason that we weren't winning. And here we are about to be, what now, 5 quarterbacks later at the Baker Mayfield. Deshaun Watson, Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco. But 5 quarterbacks later, after they made that decision to move on from Baker Mayfield and give Deshaun Watson all that money, and that has completely blown up in their face. And when we had Jeremy Fowler, ESPN NFL reporter insider, on yesterday, he even said, to your point, CC, you got that they got that first round draft pick next year. If you don't believe in the 4 guys you have right now, and if Arch Manning wows people like many people believe he's going to do at Texas in 2025, you can be something's going to stick with quarterback. At a certain point, if you believe in somebody, what kind of resources are you going to give that somebody? And can you be trusted to do that based on what we've seen from this organization since 1999?
Well, here's what I'll say. The infrastructure is in place for a young quarterback to have success. All you got to do is look back at the season the Browns had a couple of years ago where Joe Flacco came off the couch and led them to the playoffs. They had enough talent on that roster in order to support a young quarterback. They have a two-time Coach of the Year in Kevin Stefanski. They have what I believe to be a competent general manager in Andrew Berry. You have to be able to swing and miss so bad on Deshaun Watson and still justify keeping your job based on what the team has been able to do on the field. So I think this is different than the last 24 years in Cleveland, 25 years in Cleveland, because they do have a roster that can properly support a young quarterback. They have the makings of an elite defense. They have the best defensive player in all of football in Myles Garrett. They got some nice weapons on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line has always been steady. So I just feel like this is a situation that's tailor-made for a young quarterback. And here's the deal, Freddie C. Even if Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel don't do enough to dissuade you from taking a quarterback next year, at least you get them the opportunity to get experience, to get good tape. And if they don't figure into your quarterback room in a backup capacity, then you can always look to flip one of those guys and get the draft pick back that you invested in them. So I just think for a myriad of different reasons, it makes all the sense in the world to see those guys starting the majority of the games rather than Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, because you mentioned the personnel. I think Jerome Ford and Quinshon Judkins, a running back, are going to be really good for Cleveland Browns. Jerry Jeudy was able to be the kind of guy we thought we were going to see when he was drafted by the Denver Broncos. I think Cedric Tillman is underrated at the wide receiver.
I agree with that.
And Cedric Tillman,
David and Joe.
tied in as well. And the offensive line can stay a little bit healthy because you need Joe Matonio to look like the guy we saw that was at all-pro level at the left guard for Cleveland. So you're right, the personnel is there. But if your quarterback can't match it to your personnel, you keep throwing quarterbacks at it, then nobody finds a rhythm. Nobody finds any kind of sincere ability to say, yeah, we can trust this. So to your point, your young quarterbacks have to find a way to step up and be given a chance to step up. If Joe Flacco's your quarterback going at the beginning of the season, I understand that. If he's still your quarterback by week 11, what does that say, CC, about the Browns not being able to bring Shedeur Sanders and also Dylan Brooks and even Kenny Pickett further along than they should to make sure this is going to fly right when it comes to the Cleveland Browns?
Well, let me be clear about one thing. I don't think it'll be Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett on this roster as we go into the regular season. They ain't carrying 4 quarterbacks.
True.
So they're going to move off of one of those guys.
Okay.
And based off of the locker room, you would think that Kenny Pickett would be the guy that the Cleveland Browns try to flip. Yeah. Because they've had experience, they've had success with Joe Flacco. Proof of concept, right? Mm-hmm. I mentioned a couple of years ago them going to the playoffs. But I do think that Joe Flacco, at some point, whether it's preseason, whether it's September, whether it's October, should give way to Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. Again, the franchise is best served with